Chapter 2 of Tractate Sanhedrin lists various other laws of the court, here in regards to the Kohen Gadol and kings. The first Mishnah says, a Kohen Gadol can judge or be judged, and can testify and be testified against. A Kohen Gadol can do chalitza, the rejection of the Levirate marriage, and chalitza can be done with his wife, as can yibum, the Levirate marriage, although the Kohen Gadol cannot do yibum, as he cannot marry a widow. Rabbi Meir says, if a Kohen Gadol's relative passes, he cannot follow right behind the bier. He can only appear when they're out of his sight, and he can only go as far as the entrance gates of his city. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and says the Kohen Gadol cannot even leave the temple to follow a bier. When the Kohen Gadol comforts mourners, and the line of people pass by them, the Kohen Gadol walks alongside them with the assistant Kohen Gadol alongside him. When the Kohen Gadol is being comforted, people tell him, "We are your atonement," and he responds, "May you be blessed from heaven." And when he's fed the mourner's meal, everybody sits on the ground and he reclines on a bench. A king cannot judge or be judged, or testify or be testified against. He cannot do chalitza or yibum, and chalitza or yibum cannot be done with his wife. It's actually a dispute whether a king should do yibum or chalitza. You cannot marry a king's widow. Others say a king can marry a king's widow, as King David married King Saul's widow. The Gemara says, it mentioned the Kohen Gadol can judge and be judged, just as it said the same formatting by a king. Some say it specifically mentions the Kohen Gadol can be judged, to say that if a Kohen Gadol kills somebody accidentally, he's exiled. It additionally clarifies that in non-capital cases, just like everybody else, a Kohen Gadol is judged before a court of three. In regard to the Kohen Gadol testifying, this means he testifies before a king, as befits his honor. It's also said that a king cannot be a part of the Sanhedrin, as the other judges wouldn't be able to dispute him then, and the king and Kohen Gadol cannot participate in the extension to a leap year, as a king might want to save wages for his army, and the Kohen Gadol might want to make it so that way Yom Kippur won't fall out when it's cold. This is discussed. It gives sources for the points on the Kohen Gadol's mourning. The laws of the kings, that they cannot judge or be judged, applies to the kings of Israel. Kings of the Davidic dynasty can. It was instituted that the kings of Israel cannot after Alexander Yanai, a heretical king, was judged, and Shimon ben Shattach reprimanded this, and it caused a lot of issues. It was also said that a king cannot do chalitza, as it's a mitzvah, and you cannot renounce your honor to do a mitzvah. It discusses points on several of King David's marriages. Related, it refers to Ruth's son as a son of Naomi, which is as Naomi raised him. It says similarly about other scriptural figures, including Moshe and Batya, who raised him, and it said, whoever teaches a boy Torah, it's as if he fathered him, which is based on some verses. There are further points on King David's marriages, and how Saul gave his daughter Michal to another man, Palti, in marriage after David, although Palti supported her but never was intimate with her. Some additional points on this topic are discussed. New Mishnah, if somebody related to a king passes, he cannot leave the entrance of the palace to follow the funeral procession. Others say he can if he wants to, as King David followed the bier of Avner, but others say that was unique as it was done to placate the people. When the king eats the mourner's meal, everybody sits on the floor and he sits on a dargash, which is a type of chair. The Gemara says a debate. Some say women should go in front or behind a funeral bier, depending on the custom, and others say they should always go in front, and they debate this based on a number of verses. It argues as to what exactly a dargash is. It's said to be a leather cot of some sort. It describes the bed a bit further. New Mishnah. A king can wage war with the consent of the Sanhedrin of 71 judges, and a king is allowed to break fences of people's property to make himself a path to his field, and people cannot protest this. A king has first choice of any spoils of war. The Gemara says it repeats the first point, now by the laws of kings. Some say a king can actually use any of these powers, others say they're just stated to make people fear the king. It's debated from a number of verses whether the Jewish people had a requirement to appoint a king. Some say it was required, some say it was only as they were complaining that they wanted one. When the Jewish people entered the land of Israel, they had 3 commandments: to appoint a king, to eradicate Amalek, and to build the temple. They didn't know the order, so it's explained it's based on scripture. Also, it lists points on King Solomon's kingship. It said that it slowly regressed from including being over the upper beings to only being over his country, to only over Jerusalem, to only his bed, and then only his staff, which is based on some verses. It's debated if King Solomon fully regained his kingship after he lost it for a period to the king of the demons, as discussed in Tractate Gittin on page 68b. New Mishnah. The verse says a king cannot take too many wives. Some say this is a limit on 18, others say he can have more so long as they don't turn him away from God. Others say he cannot even marry a single woman that'll turn him away from God, with a limit on 18. The Gemara explains the dispute to be between an interpretation on scripture. It additionally explains the source for the limit of 18 based on points on the wives of King David. It also expounds on verses regarding the incident with Amnon and Tamar. It says in the verse that Amnon hated Tamar after he violated her, as his genitalia had been cut by her hair. It says that this was as Tamar was the daughter of a convert, as a Jewish woman up until the destruction of the first temple didn't have any hair grow on their body. After the incident with Tamar, people started being a lot more careful with such things, and the laws against seclusion and cohabitation with an unmarried woman were instituted. It expounds on further verses. New Mishnah. The verse says, a king shouldn't have too many horses. This means he should only have enough for his chariots. It also says he shouldn't have too much gold and silver, which is that he should only have enough to pay his soldiers. A king writes his own Torah scroll, which he takes to war and brings to judgment, and sets it opposite himself when he reclines, based on the verse. The Gemara additionally expounds on the points and sources for the limit to how many horses and coins he can have. It says King Solomon transgressed here. He also married the Pharaoh's daughter, and when he did so, it said that the angel Gabriel went and stuck a reed at the bottom of the ocean, which slowly formed into a sandbank where Rome was built atop eventually. It explains the reason there are many commandments in the Torah which don't have explanation given, things like the laws of kosher or sha'anis. It is because there are laws which, if explained, people would try to circumvent them logically, as King Solomon did. For instance, the prohibition against the king having too many wives or horses actually did have explanations given, not to have too many wives, as otherwise the king would turn from God. So King Solomon thought to cut the wives and just not turn from God, and it didn't really work out. And the prohibition against having too many horses was so that way nobody would return to the land of Egypt, which Solomon thought to get the horses without returning to the land of Egypt, and that didn't end up working out either. It's additionally said that a king should write his own Torah scroll even if he was passed down one, and some say this applies to every Jewish person, and the custom nowadays is to have a letter written on your behalf within a scroll by the scribe. It says the Torah was originally written in Hebrew, but was later also given in Aramaic for the Samaritans. It expounds various points on these different scripts. New Mishnah. Only the king can ride on the king's horse, and only the king can sit on the king's throne or use the king's scepter. No one can watch the king's hair be cut, and nobody can watch him undress in the bathhouse, as the verse implies that the awe of the king must be upon you. The Gemara expounds on various verses regarding King David and Avishag, and various points on the tragedy of a man who loses his wife. It said that a person is predestined in the womb to marry somebody, but to remarry it's as difficult to arrange as the splitting of the sea. There are various other teachings on the closeness between a husband and a first wife. It said based on verses that a king cuts his hair every day, a Kohen Gadol every Friday, before the Mishmar group comes, a Kohen every 30 days, just like the standard Nazirite term. It said Kohanim can still now grow out their hair, as they'll still be able to serve in the temple immediately when Mashiach comes, as they could just cut their hair really quickly, although there would be issues with Kohanim becoming intoxicated. It also describes the Kohen Gadol's unique haircut that he would receive. And that's the end of chapter 2.